Charles Savage is with us now. He's the Chief Executive of Global Trader. And this is a company that, well, was breaking all kinds of pioneering ground here in South Africa, introduced contracts for difference to the country, but has gone through a rough patch in the last little while. We'll be finding out from Charles how they're going to address it and where to from here, and remembering that there is a very close connection for investors in a company called Friday Capital, which is the controlling shareholder of Global Trader and driven by, well, a guy who was almost chief executive of Standard Bank one day. His name is Mark Barnes, but that's a story for a different period. Charles Savage is with us now. You've had a wonderful reputation, Global Trader, in South Africa, bringing contracts for difference here. How big is your client base built up to?
Firstly, thanks, Alec. Yes, we have. We've had a great run in South Africa. We have over 3,000 active clients, which means that on any given month we have 3,000 people participating through our systems and platforms and traders.
And in a way, you almost broke a myth that contracts for difference couldn't be a good market in South Africa. I think the stock exchange was promoting single stock futures, which have also been successful. With TFTs, do you know how they stack up against SSF?
So the only market evidence or statistics really that we've got is by talking to brokers that are so friendly to us. And from doing that research, we believe that TFTs account for about 6 to 8% of the JSE volumes already. So a significant growth, and that's come off a base of 1.5 to 2% as it was 2 years ago.
Why did you go into the UK?
The UK is the founder of CFDs. It's been around there since the late 80s. It contributes 50% of the FTSE volumes and reportedly as much as 80% on any given day. And it's also the most maturely regulated market as well. And so we believe we'd learn a lot from that market space. The regulatory framework would help us passport into the rest of the world. And so it was an obvious destination for us.
How tough was it to get approval from the regulator?
It's incredibly tough. The process, one, is capital intensive, but two, it needs resources and staff and skills that you can't easily acquire.
Well, it seemed quite good for a period of time, but no longer. What exactly went wrong?
We had 2 client accounts that we found out are owned by a related party who went into margin call as little as 2.5 months ago. And in attempting to liquidate those positions, the market conditions turned against us, and that liquidity dried up, and the price value depreciated aggressively, which left the client in a shortfall position that we were unable to cover.
How big is that position?
I'm not at liberty to say right now.
I'll tell you why, because Mark Barnes of Friday Capital has said you guys are trading well in South Africa, and we've got no reason to doubt that. You'd wonder, if that's the case, why not bail out the UK operation?
I think, and Mark put it well when he spoke on this show, in that the size of the deficit is just too big for Purple's balance sheet. They're a relatively small company, and in terms of what they can and can't put at risk, I think that the investment required is just too large for a business of Purple size.
How did this whole thing get so far? Surely there's limits that you can cut off, or times at which you can cut things off.
In normal market circumstances, yes, and specifically you rely on 3 things. 1 is the liquidity of the stock, 2 is the price, and 3 is the client. And when it was clear that the client wasn't able to meet his requirements, we had to rely on the stock price and the stock liquidity. And both of those turned against us, and to the extent that we were unable to get out of the positions that he was in.
The Internet's a wonderful thing, and there's lots of information going around, including that website I mentioned earlier, globaltraderclients.com. 2 companies were identified there, Artilium and SCI Entertainment. Can you confirm?
I can confirm. Those are the 2 positions that put us in this position.
Do you know much about these companies?
I do. I mean, I'm not an analyst and I don't have a view on their positions, but they're both tech stocks. SCI has predominantly been built on the back of Tomb Raider. They own the rights to software, the game. And Artilium is a software company that does telecommunications software, which crosses over platforms between desktop applications and mobile.
Well, that's interesting, because Tomb Raider has a South African connection as well.
It does. I believe it was IDOS. It was owned by IDOS originally, which had South African investors.
Brett Keble was involved in that as well. I think he made a lot of money out of it, and so did some other South African investors. But as far as Purple Capital is concerned, the investment community has linked clearly this tragedy with Purple Capital's future, the share price tumbling from R1.80 at the time that did the deal with you originally to below R1 today. Is it that big a deal in Purple Capital's life?
I don't believe it is. And I think the financial results that will come out, the financial year into February, will stand testament to that. I mean, what it certainly does is puts on hold global traders' aspirations in terms of international growth for a period. And it's difficult to say what that period is going to be because right now we're focused on resolving the problems that face us in Europe and not on future strategy. But in my view, I think that the share price has been overdone.
What's the process now in Europe?
The administrators have full control, and essentially it's up to them to act in the interest of the creditors and our clients.
And how many clients do you have?
There are less than 200 funded accounts, so there are less than 200 people that are affected by it.
Many South Africans or ex-South Africans amongst them?
No, not many. I'd say less than 2 or 3.
And how's the market generally? Because you've had publicity in the Telegraph, the Financial Times. How's the market in London taken this news?
Look, for the London market, this is not the first time something like this has occurred. And it's a huge marketplace and we're a very small player. And so I think there's been very little interest in what's happened to us. I think we've raised a lot more interest in South Africa. We've been in the Telegraph, but we certainly haven't been on CNBC. And I think the real interest is around the South African response to these events.
And here, have you had much of an impact?
Initially we did. We saw as much as 10% of our clients withdraw cash. And since then we've seen 80% of that come back already, and we've got positive cash flows in terms of deposits again. So initially clients sort of said, well, let's test them, let's see if they're good for what they say. They did that, and we've delivered all the funds back to them, and they've come back and started trading with us. And our clients have been incredibly supportive, and we're very appreciative of that.
How can you be sure it won't happen in South Africa?
Well, there are 2 reasons. One, very different business models. South Africa is largely a retail-driven business. With 3,000 clients, and our biggest client contributes less than 3% of our revenue. And that's the first point. The second point is that the risk management policies and procedures that are in place in South Africa were very different to those that were in place in the UK.
Why so?
Because of the client base that you're dealing with. The rules that you apply to retail clients are very different to the rules that you apply to high net worth individuals and small to medium-sized hedge funds.
There's talk, or certainly there was a newspaper article in the UK to say that one of the assets that you've taken possession of is a £16 million house in Holland Park, in a swanky area of London. Is that accurate?
It is accurate, yes.
16 million, that's like a 200 million rand house. I don't know if one of those exists in this country. Is it a particularly palatial abode?
I'm hoping so. I haven't seen the house, and we haven't, we've visited it and taken photographs, but we haven't got access to the house.
But how come you take possession of it? How does that work?
Well, the company that was trading, the account that was trading was owned by a limited liability company, and the house was an asset of that company.
All right. So you basically have taken over that.
We've attached that asset. Yes.
The asset of that house. You trade a lot in the retail market, excuse me, here in South Africa. Are your clients nervous, not about you, but about the market generally?
In general, I think they are. We've seen from January and February volumes are relatively down on January, February last year. Having said that, they still, in comparison to what a broker would see in terms of volume, we still see incredibly good volumes. And specifically, that's driven by our products. We have access to gold, platinum, palladium, and the likes. And that gives us a competitive advantage of the brokers that are traditionally selling only equities. And you have to look at the gold price and see why people are enjoying commodity run.
And the volatility that we've seen on the JSE generally, are you seeing that amongst CFD prices of pretty much all assets? Yes,
sure. And volatility is good for us. It drives short-term volume, and that drives revenue. So the volatility is good for us in the short term. In the long term, though, it tends to destroy client wealth. And so, we would like, if we could decide, we'd like the volatility to return to more stable levels.
But in summary, then, in South Africa, global trader business as usual?
The South African business is completely protected. It's a separate legal entity with no cross obligations. And we are focusing on the future in South Africa and trying not to deal with, let our attention be turned to what's happening in the UK. My time and the executive time is completely consumed at the moment in dealing with the UK and ensuring that our clients and creditors get full value. And so the South African management team, which is in place, their mandate and function is really to ensure that the business continues to grow, and they're doing a great job about it.
Charles Savage, the Chief Executive Global Trader. That's all for you today from Power Lunch, which is brought to you in association with MoneyWeb. We're crossing now to CNBC Europe for Power Lunch Europe with Louisa Boyson. CNBC Africa back at 4 o'clock Central African Time with Regional Update.